All right, so let's start. So thank you
Yes.
so much, Gracie, for joining. And as I just kind of shared, the whole idea behind our Fireside Chat series is to have a conversation around identity. And
Hmm.
today's conversation is about transgender identity, love, and politics. And I think what's so interesting about our connection is that I've known you through your transition,
Yes, you
actually.
have.
And so I have a series of questions that I really just want to kind of talk through. I want to have a conversation with you. And, the idea, honestly, and I think you might have heard a little bit about this when I was talking to Amara, I tend to find sometimes I'm in rooms where people are just diametrically opposed to my views. I think that happens to all of us, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
when we create safe space, oftentimes what happens is we're also creating echo chambers and we're not necessarily in conversation with people who think differently than we do. And so what I want to offer is a perspective of your lived experience that can help others who are not having the same lived experience understand who you are and what it really means to be transgender through your point of view, right? Because we're all multidimensional beings. So just know that's kind of the rationale behind many of the questions that I have. And I want you to be as comfortable and forthright as you wish to. And so I want to start at the beginning. Can you tell me a little bit about your transition?
Well, I just reached my 4-year anniversary into transitioning in April.
Oh, beautiful. Happy birthday.
Yes, thank you. And I really feel that I am at a point in my life and in my transition that I'm finally like settled in myself, settled in my body, settled in my mind, settled in my spirit, and more so settled in my decision of, transitioning.
Hmm.
And it's been a long time coming. And as I was listening to you and Amara's conversation, when you spoke on being young and some children, how do parents know, or how do the children know? And for me, I really knew at a very young age there was something unique and different about me, and I knew it in the way of in how I related to other women, how I looked at other women, the essence of a woman, the femininity in a woman, and also the way how I related to men. And I knew that it was a different feeling in how men are attracted to men. I knew it was like really like that divine feminine energy of how a woman interacts with the exchange of the masculine energy. Like I said, I was around 4 or 5 when I would like look at my mother and like be in awe of her. And I knew that it was just something at that time. Of course, you're told that it's not right to act or conduct in that way. But I just always knew that it was something different. So it was like you said, with you knowing me, I went 37 years of my life living in that space of what Amara was saying in fear. Although I loved who I was in my past life, I still knew that that wasn't who I really was, if that makes sense. And I think that that was one of the hardest things for me to transition. It wasn't as if I wasn't accepting or loving or at peace with who I was. I just knew that it was this something wasn't fully aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was why my transition was always about integration for me, not killing off the person that I used to be, not denying my existence of who I used to be, but combining the two. And I'm glad that you spoke on when you were saying about us all having different points of views, because for me sometimes, with me being transgender, I sometimes feel that my point of view is a bit different from the norm of other transgender women, and it sometimes makes me feel a little like an outsider in the transgender community, because like I said, I really celebrate who I was. From us being friends, that I always still acknowledge my past self. I always still celebrate that person. I always still hold space for that person, even in my continuing ongoing journey of me living fully in my truth now. It's
Right.
not, I'm trying to separate the two. It's all one. I feel that that is what makes me whole. So it's been quite the journey, but I will say that I am very grateful to finally be living fully in my truth. And it's interesting because the more I celebrate my whole self, the more things begin to shift in my life, the more I get to see life from a more broader, colorful, fun perspective.
I miss talking to you so much. I love that we're talking now.
We always had the best
We always do.
conversations.
I'm so curious though, if you want to share a bit about just like your family, because you have a daughter. You also do you have a granddaughter or grandson?
I have a grandbaby.
Grandbaby. Okay, so tell me a little bit about just like you've honored both the before and your now. And so,
Yes.
how was that for your family? I know your mom recently passed. You guys are really close. She was supportive of you. What was that like?
Honestly, it was the hardest of my transition. Um, when I first came out and told my mother at the age of 18 that at the time when I identified as being a gay male, the first thing my mother said to me was, "I don't mind if you're gay as long as you don't dress up like a woman." So
Huh.
I always, like I said, from a young child at the age of 18, when I started coming out, I'm from the ballroom culture. And my first time going to a ball was the first time that I seen a trans woman in her full essence of, the whole body, and that's when it clicked, and that's when it made sense to me, like, oh, the feelings and the thoughts that and the visions that I was having for myself. But when I told my mother that I was gay, she said, well, as long as you don't dress up like a woman. My whole life, it was always, boys don't do this, you don't do that, boys don't do this, you don't stand like this. When I would hang out with girls, my mother would always say, why are you always hanging out with all these girls? When I would hang out with boys, why? So it was like I kind of grew up with all of these suppressed emotions of not knowing like how to be and how to act or what was the norm for me. However, when I decided to transition, 2 years before I transitioned, I had a conversation with my daughter, and my daughter told me she would be 25 in November. And my daughter told me at the time, she said, I don't agree with that. God didn't make you that way. I don't want you to do it. So at that time, when I was really ready to go forward with it, I stopped. And I was like, I'm not going to do it. I put her thoughts, her feelings, her needs, her desires, and her point of view above mine. And I also had the conversation with my mother, and I'll never forget my mother telling me, she said, I remember that I told you as long as you don't dress up like a woman. She was like, but it's so interesting that we're having this conversation. She said, because I was watching Oprah the other day and they had something about transgenders on there. And she said, I wanted to say to you that I feel so guilty and that I feel so bad that I said that to you, because I feel like had I would have not said that to you, you would have been living your life the way that you wanted to live your life. So it was good to know that I had my mother's support. However, my daughter's opinion, like, over it took precedence over everyone. So for those 2 years, I decided, okay, I'm going to continue being happy with me and continue, doing me and being me. And that was at a point in my life when I was really thriving here in LA. It was like kind of like my fourth year of being in LA, and I was like, I was killing it in my career. I had my little penthouse in LA, so I was like thinking I was all the cookies and cream. I just had got nominated for an Emmy, but I was the most unhappiest that I had ever been in my life. And I kept asking myself, like, why am I so unhappy? Why am I so unhappy when so much good is going on in my life? Why am I feeling this way? So I continued to like pray and meditate on it and just pray and pray and pray. And one day, Pa, it just came to me so clear and so simple. It was, and you know how they sometimes when they say it's like a little small, it was really just, it was just easy, like, because you're not living in your truth. And I'll never forget, I called my daughter like a week later and I told her, I said, I know that this was your opinions and your thoughts and your feelings, but I just want to let you know I love you with everything in me. However, I love myself more and I need to do this for me. And that's when I began my transition. I had stopped working at my job. The same day I started my transition, I started my hormone therapy and I started mental therapy, because for me, mental was my main priority. My mental and my spiritual foundation was priority. Before I did any physical changes, I wanted to make sure that my mind was right. I wanted to make sure that my spirit was right. Growing up in so many different religious backgrounds, my father being Muslim, grew up in Lutheran school, Catholic school, Christian. Like I was around so many different, faiths. So I was going to Agape at the time, and I had a conversation with Reverend Michael Beckwith, who was one of my mentors, and I told him everything that I was feeling, and he gave me the support and the encouragement spiritually, and along with my mental. Like
Yeah.
it all just like happened, and it just like kind of happened really fast. Now, my mother was my biggest cheerleader. However, me and my daughter's relationship suffered a great deal. My sister, she wasn't as supportive. And at the time, my mother, you know how close we were. She was my best friend. And as long as I had her support, I really didn't care about anyone else's. My father was no longer living. So I went on and did what I needed to do for myself. It was about a year. Me and my daughter did not talk at all. It was the day that I had my breast augmentation that we had a phone call that did not go well at all. It was like, I think we both said the most meanest things that we possibly could have ever said. So many things that I've always wanted to say, but I was sparing her feelings. Like it all came out that day.
Yeah.
And we just, time just went on. She got pregnant with my grandbaby. We weren't talking. We was not speaking at the time. However, my mother's passing has reconnected me and my daughter. We're in the most amazing place that we've ever been. And with my mother's passing, it has also brought me and my grandbaby closer. So it's like I've kind of understood the cycles of life. The support that I didn't think that I had then, I have now.
Yeah.
And I'm just in a very good space. I'm in a very good space.
How old is your grandbaby?
She's 2,
Okay. And your mom's been gone a year?
and my mother, it'll be October 17th, will be a year that she passed.
I read a poem recently by Rupi Kapoor about motherhood and their daughters. And I think it can be applied to any parent and child relationship. And it basically talked a little bit about you want them to stay forever. But when they leave, what is so beautiful is that you get to love them through all of the ones who are left behind because their spirit literally lives there. And that's just what kind of came to me as you were talking about your grandbaby. So congratulations on the
Thank
baby.
you. Thank you, Pam.
You're welcome. I want to can we talk about love?
Let's talk about it, girl, because I got a different conversation now, honey.
Okay, your whole tone changes. You just tell me about you're also an actress and an artist. What's your first love story?
I'm going to go with right now.
Yeah.
Very fresh, very new. However, it feels very familiar and very comfortable. As cliche as it sounds when people say, oh, you just love on yourself and self-acceptance, but it really has been through my own self-acceptance of who I am that I feel. And I say that because every time when things in regards to my transition, things in regards to gender, things in regards to sex, when all of those different emotions and triggers and projections come up for me,
Yeah.
I'm always reminded that that I'm safe and that I am accepted fully for who I am. That is something that I've never experienced, and I think that's why I want to focus on love right now, because even the relationships that I was in the past and my prior to transitioning, I always still felt that I wasn't my full whole self. Again, it's still fresh and it's still like new, but it's something that I've never experienced before, Pi. Like, the conversation that we would have and like all of my fears and all of my worries. It's like, it feels good to really be in a safe space to where as though nothing that comes up or nothing that shows up can change the fact of the level of safety and connection and chemistry that I have with this person.
So I wonder if it's the same answer when I ask you what's your ideal for a future love story. What does that look like for you?
Love and family. Like, I honor the fact that, and I respect the fact that I don't look to my daughter to call me mother. That's not something that I'm seeking, but I am seeking to be a mother, and I am seeking to learn from my mistakes from the past, my actions, my thoughts, my patterns, my moving around, me trying to figure myself out. It really did affect my child. And it allowed me to have more patience and forgiveness for my parents and see that, we're all just, trying to figure it out. And we're all just trying to get to know and get to love ourselves. But the future, I really do. I see me being wifey. I see me being mommy. And I see me continuing to thrive in my career. But I will say that I think for so long I was so focused on career that I'm now in a space that I've learned, and throughout this whole process of sitting and being with myself and, losing my mom, that creating a family and creating a legacy of my own is my number one goal and my number one dream and priority. Everything else is just like icing on the cake.
What is your legacy that you're building? What do you want people to remember you by? I mean, why don't you also just tell folks who you are now and what you hope people will remember you to be?
Just being an authentic, radiant beam of fucking light and magic.
Unicorn.
I want people to remember me by just, no matter what life has thrown at me, I've continued to stand in my light, to stand in my truth, to stand in my power, to want to uplift and hold space for others to do the same. This whole downtime has really made me reevaluate why I wanted to do things, why my dreams and why my visions were the way that they were. And on some small scale, it was a bit superficial. It was a bit for all the glitz and glamour, because I look like I fit the role of that Hollywood girl. But now it was more so about understanding why it is that I'm doing what I'm doing, understanding the craft and realizing that just as much as I do want to continue to pursue acting, that I also want to continue pursuing using my voice for change, using my voice for people to just be whoever and whatever it is that they want to be.
Do you remember who the first person was that you saw, whether in person or on TV or in a magazine, that felt like you?
My mom, without a doubt.
Really?
My mom, without a doubt. And that was always my dream, was to be like my mother. And I'll never forget, it was the church fashion show across the street, and she had on this beautiful white dress with this big one sleeve ruffle, and her hair was perfectly coiffed. And that was the moment that I knew that I wanted to be exactly like my mother. Now, I will say Grace Jones, Tina Turner, and Rihanna are women that really give me that source of inspiration and strength to fully stand in my power and my womanhood and my badassery.
How do you define the standards of beauty? I mean, is it those people specifically? Is that who you're looking at now and saying, that's what beautiful is, that's who I am, or is it something totally different?
It's something totally, it used to be.
Okay.
It did. It used to, at one point it was, but now for me, beauty is just true authenticity. I know that we all are a bit hard on ourselves in regards to what we think beauty is defined by, or what beauty is. And especially for a trans woman, it kind of it's a little added layer on it, because we have to go through and break down all these different ways of not seeing ourselves, of how we used to be, coming up with all these different descriptions of what a beautiful woman is supposed to, beautiful woman doesn't have big feet. Beautiful woman doesn't have big hands or big foreheads and all this. So it's breaking through all those layers and limitations of what beauty is, and just fully owning your own essence and your own aura and your own energy and your own zhuzh, shall I say.
You and I have talked a little bit about what it means to have a solid livelihood, and you talked about your transition and you left your job, and I just remember vividly when you were sharing the various transitions that you even knew of friends, and how if you didn't have a certain type of job that allowed you to transition within it, maybe you could only live at night. What does that mean? You can only live at night. That's always stayed with me.
The reality of it is trans women working, we are at a disadvantage. And I'm grateful that I did establish a career before I transitioned, to where as though when I transitioned, people had already knew who I was at the core of my being, my work ethic, how I show up. so that it kind of helped. But however, I still was afraid to show up as my authentic self in the very beginning. I feared so much, like, you know, showing up on set, like, how is everyone going to look at me? How is everyone going to treat me? So for me at that time, when I had kind of like took a step back from the industry and started working in a nightclub scene, it was safe, it was easy, and I was in the, you know, around my rainbow family, so I felt like it was okay to show up as myself, opposed to, you know, daytime, you know, worrying about 5 o'clock shadows, because, you know, she had a full on foo that had to, like, just all of those different things. And it's like, those are the things that really, although it may seem like, oh well, that's nothing, or that's like just like outer, but it really does, it really, I don't know how to explain how much it really affects with your, like, your mental,
Mm.
and how you show up and how you feel comfortable within yourself. So it took a really long time to break out of just that feeling comfortable and feeling safe at nighttime, and then going out in the daytime. But I think it gets to a certain point where you just become so free and so liberated within yourself that you're just so happy to finally be living your truth that after a while you don't even give a shit anymore. Because I look at some of my old pictures and I'd be like, oh bitch, you had a lot of heart. Like, you was you was out here, like, I mean, to where though now, like, the
Yeah.
way how I show up now, and I'm looking like I'm worrying about this one. Back then I would go out like razor bumps, everything, because it was a process for me. But at that time I was just so happy to finally be living in my truth that it really didn't even matter to me.
Hmm. Have there been places that you've gone to that have surprised you in welcoming you, or have surprised you in not?
um what surprised me, it was after taking a step back, my first big job back in the industry was working with the Smith family, working with Jada Pinkett, and I was so warmly welcomed into, like, their home, their space, that it really, it did. I will not. I mean, first of all, it's like, come on, it's the Smiths. I grew up from Philadelphia. Will Smith was, he was, I didn't really have a father figure so Will Smith was kind of like that male role model for me.
Hmm.
So for me to be working and being in the Smiths residence, it was huge. And also for them to treat me with so much love, Jaden, Willow, just their staff, it was what I needed at that particular point in time of my life. Were there places that I was um surprised and shocked? The only thing I can say with that is kind of like family.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and even still now, I went back home a couple of weeks ago to clean out my mother's house and to go there for the first time, and that was, the hardest thing that I think I've ever had to do. But even now, like, still going home and still understanding and realizing, no matter how much you grow, and no matter how much you accept yourself, and no matter how much you're in a space of acceptance in your journey, that others will still try to keep you to where as though it's comfortable for them, to where as though it's safe for their own understanding. And it's really, really triggering, like extremely triggering, especially when you have, like, built a life, you built a family. I built a chosen family that sees me as I see myself and honor me the way that I honor myself. And to kind of like go back into that environment, it's extremely challenging, but I'm so grateful that it has shown me how I no longer react. And I think that that comes from a place of really being grounded in my truth, that it's like, no matter what or how you see me, I know myself.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it's not very challenging. And it's unfortunate that my family are the ones that I really have had to enforce very strict boundaries, very strict ways of being.
Did you feel that way when you were identifying as a Black gay man versus now being Gracie?
The thing is, Pa, I've always felt that.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt that, and I think that whether it was Kareem, whether it was Gracie, I now realize that it was what it was just really the uniqueness in my life. That no matter what form that it shows up in, it's just always kind of like going to be a lot, and it's going to test and challenge people's views, thoughts, and opinions.
Do you always feel safe? Because, we had this conversation with Amara just in regard to Black trans women's mortality rate, the life expectancy. Do you feel safe everywhere that you go, or are you more conscious in certain spaces?
I don't know. I don't know if it's that I'm just so like kind of like numb to all of the traumatic experiences that I've been through in my life that I just no longer give a shit. Excuse me, I don't know when
It's okay.
um because I've been through a lot of different violent acts in my past life. I've experienced a lot of violence, gun violence, in my past life. I've been shot twice. I've had my jaw broke one time. So, and I grew up fighting all the time. I went from being bullied to becoming the bully to always fighting. So I don't know if it's because I've like experienced so much of that the fear of how I show up is like, I really just don't like have that fear. It shows up in the back of my mind. Of course it's when I'm like out in certain spaces or certain places that I'm very conscious and that I'm aware of my surroundings. Or sometimes I'm like, oh, let me get out of here. When people come and approach me, I get a little. But for the most part, I think it's just finally being so free and liberated in my spirit that that element of fear, even though it may be there a bit, I'm just like, and I don't like this, but it is what it is. I just feel like, I mean, I lost all of my loved ones, all of my parents, my best friend. I've been through what I've been through in the past. I just feel like at this point, however it's going to be, it's going to be, but it's not going to stop me from living each and every day as if it's my last, because of going through and overcoming so much. So right now, I'm just so happy and just so at peace with myself that I'm not living in a fantasy world. And honestly, sometimes I feel a bit guilty that I do feel this way because of so many of my trans brothers and sisters that are being murdered. But I just choose not to live in that fear.
I read something recently as an interview, I think that's online, and you describe yourself as being in peace and on fire at the same time. What does that mean?
Although it's like chaos and
Mm-hmm.
chaotic outside of me and all around me, I don't experience that within me. It's not to say that I still don't have my challenges. It's not to say that I'm still working through things and overcoming certain things. But for the most part, I have a sense of peace within myself that however the cards may be, I'm okay with who I am, where I am, and how I am in this present moment. And in the process, I know that I'm lit. Like, I know that I'm lit, and I don't mean that in an egotistical way. I mean it in a way of that I know I'm showing up as my full self.
Yeah.
I know that I'm like whatever it is that I do or however it is that I show up, may show up a little late, but I know I'm giving it my all, and I know that I'm enjoying this, and that's something that I haven't been doing, and I'm like really enjoying this. Like you know how I've been in the industry before. I'm just like I enjoy now just speaking my truth. I enjoy when people say things like, "Wow, watching you in your healing journey is really helping me heal." Like that's what gives me fire. That's what gives me fuel to like keep at it.
Yeah. When I'm curious, just to kind of come back, I want to go talk a little bit about politics and Black Lives Matter. And I know you've been out there in the various protests. I read something recently. I don't remember who it was, but they were Black trans woman. And she said, I'd love to be in in the protest right now, but I can't afford to be arrested. How does that land on you? What does that mean to you?
Still again that fear. And I respect everyone's journey and everyone's thought process, but for me it's not even, it's like I look at it as not only it's like I look at it as not only showing up for my people, but I look at it as me showing up for myself first and foremost. So whether it be putting myself on the line and getting arrested, and whether it be me putting myself on the line of being attacked, it's that's all I know how to do right now, is to stand up for myself and to stand up and to speak out, to just show up for, like, shit is not right. It's not right. I'm going to do whatever it is that I have to do for myself and my community.
Who's the villain in this story? I mean, when shit's not right, and when we talked to Ankhra, we talked about all of the various dynamics around race and culture, socioeconomic. Is it a belief system? Is it indoctrination? What are you fighting against? Who are you fighting against?
The oppression of the belief system and systems within ourselves, systems within our community. Because sometimes, like, I kind of like rear off to the conversation of, and I know it may ruffle a few feathers, but sometimes, like, when we're out here and when we're talking about Black trans lives matter, but then Black lives matter, but then Black men are killing trans women, Black trans women and sisters, then Black trans are speaking on Black trans lives matter, but then a lot of the girls are, like, not even loving and kind to their own Black trans sisters. So for me, sometimes I just kind of be like, I feel like we all need to look at all of the systems within ourselves that project hate, not inclusion, not acceptance. I feel like sometimes it's a bit easy to point the finger. However, do we take ownership for the part that we all play in hate and not extending love and kindness and fairness to one another? So that's why I feel like throughout this time, I hope that everyone is taking a look at ourselves and each other in the community and saying, like, well, how can I be more, not, of course we know that, about the white supremacy and how it has been set up to oppress us, but I feel like we can also still take it a step further.
I'm glad that you asked, that you're kind of like leaning into this space, because I'm just curious, walking in the shoes of how the world sees you as a man versus how the world sees you as a woman. Has it changed any of your politics? Has it created a greater level of sensitivity? Ankhra was kind enough to just give us a great learning around, I've never not been Ankhra, I've never not been a Black woman. But I'm thinking about the world is experiencing you a certain way, and therefore how you perceive the world and what you have access to is also a little bit different. So did you have greater access when you were Kareem versus Gracie?
I think so. I do. I think so. And I can agree with what Ankhra said, but to a certain extent, I know for me sometimes, because I had that realization when it was, someone was like, Gracie, you're really out there for the Black Lives Matter movement, but do you know some of our, like, a lot of our trans sisters are, being murdered and slaughtered? And yes, I understand. And yes, I know that. But for me, at the time, my thought was, yes, I am a Black trans, yes, I am a trans woman, but at the end of the day, I'm Black first. And that's how I see it. I see the fullness of my Blackness first and foremost, because I mean, for me, it's been 4 years since I transitioned. So I've lived majority of my life as a Black man, as a Black gay man. So I know what it feels like to be a Black gay man. So it's like, okay, now that I'm a part of the beautiful trans community, it's like, I don't feel like I'm like, okay, all for trans lives matter, but not for Black, still for my Black community. That's just kind of like my views on it. And as far as politics, I'm gonna be honest, like, I am taking this time to educate myself, because when it came to politics, I was a bit more relaxed and not as educated. So I'm taking this opportunity to educate myself a whole lot more in terms of that. That's why I really don't like to speak too much on what I know that is not my strength, but I do know that shit has to change.
Do you feel that most people know that you are trans, or do you feel like they see you first as a Black woman?
Me, because I'm a bit like, I can be a little hard on myself. I always assume people just be like, oh, that's a Black trans woman, that's a trans. Like I do. And a lot of my friends always say, and they're like, why do you think you're not? For me, my goal was never to be passable. Like going into this, and like I said, coming from the ballroom scene, I know all about like the realness and realness category and like women that. For me, my goal was never to be the most aesthetically realistic looking woman. My goal was always to be the most fabulous, glamorous, and just badass woman. That was always what I wanted to be. I just always wanted, again, I just wanted to be my mom. So I still sometimes I still think that, people look at me and they like, oh, that's a trans woman. And maybe that's an area that I need to like grow or see otherwise. But right now I do. I still kind of feel like that's what people see when they see me.
But that's interesting, right? Because I want to back into that a little bit more and understand it. Because I don't know if everyone understands. Is that part of the culture within the Black trans community, specifically for women to be passable? Is that the goal?
It is, and this is what it is, and
is it fair for me to even say for the whole community? Because
not for the whole community, because I think that, and this is where I had to learn and educate myself on, because not everyone that is trans, whether it is a trans male or a trans woman or now non-binary, like everyone's goal is not to be a passable man or a passable woman. That's not everyone's goal. Everyone's aesthetic is not to, turn into the most softest feminine. Some people are fine, totally fine with how they look and how they feel and how they present themselves in the Black community. And I know that, growing up from the ballroom culture, that was kind of like the thing. It's like, you want to be realness. You want to be not able to be clocked when you go out into, not when you go out into the world. You don't want anyone to know your tea or, your truth. But for me, that wasn't mine, and that's not a lot of different people. That's the beautiful journey about the trans community, that it's like it shows up differently for everyone.
And then do you feel that, just kind of along those same lines about disclosing who you are, is that important? That whole idea of disclosing?
I think it's important. I think it's a bit safe, especially with the way how trans women are being murdered by men, and that goes to whether they know or whether they don't know, just that attraction to trans women, and then either finding out or kind of already knowing, but because of their own self-hate and their own self-acceptance, that they use it as an excuse. But I do think that disclosure I think that it's important, maybe more important for others than not, but I can only speak for myself. This is why I say, I was so glad that you said that in the beginning, because I'll be honest, like for so long, I really didn't even want to like share or speak on, different things in regards to our transness, because it really does show up for different people. And sometimes when you voice your opinion, if it's not aligned with someone else, it's kind of like looked down upon. And it's like, we all have different experiences. We all have different ways in how we want to express and exude our transness. And for me, I'm finally at a place that like, this is my truth. This is what I know for me. It's not to say that my way is the right way or your way is the right way, but this is the way that is leading me to my wholeness and to the peace and to the fire that is within me.
And just so I'm clear, just in terms of like disclosing, and I've always seen it, and this is just my perspective. I've been blessed with so many people, to know so many different types of people, right? So it's not a myopic view of the world. And my sense is that we all have a different view and culture and perspective, and there is a culture within Black trans women that's different than Black cis women because of your experience, your life experience. Do you think that that's true, or do you think it's the same? Is it about being, I'm a Black woman? Is that really the definition of Gracie? Or is it, I am a Black trans woman. That is the definition of Gracie.
I consider myself to be a beautiful Black queen, period.
Period.
However, I do know that we need to like put it out there. But for me, I just say I'm a Black queen. And again, it will always go back to my mom. All I ever wanted to do, all I ever wanted to be was my mother. And my mother was a beautiful Black woman. And that's all I want to see myself as. I don't have a problem with using trans. I don't have a problem with saying trans woman. Like when I first started talking with my friend and he was saying certain things, and I was like, oh my gosh, like he must not know. And again, that was my own ignorance of thinking that whenever people see me, they just automatically think that. And then I had like let him know, like, you do know that. Then we had that conversation, and then we just went right on about our business.
Do you feel that there is a space for liberation for all of us? And what does that look like? When will we be free?
When we are fully free within ourselves and in full acceptance of who and how we see ourselves to be, I think that we can look at others in that same lens. When you don't really feel fully authentic in your being, when there's like, I mean, we all have like our insecurities or our little things, but when you're just kind of like, when you really just are at peace with yourself, someone else's existence or freedom or liberation within themselves really does not disturb you.
That's interesting. We talked a little bit about some of the conflicts between white gay men and women and Black gay men and women. And you talked about your rainbow family. We talked about Black cis women and Black cis men and some of the conflicts between with Black trans women in particular. And so do you feel that a lot of that conflict is based on the conflict within themselves?
A bit I do. I have, for the most part, majority of all my female friends are cis women. And when I look at all of these wonderful, amazing women that I am surrounded by, I see them all to be queens, to see them like in their lane, doing what they're doing, working on themselves, loving on themselves, healing themselves, to where as though I've always felt that sort of safety and comfort in their presence. Don't feel competition. I've always felt inspiration. I've always felt sisterhood. I have to say, and I'll always continue to say that I can't say that that is something that I have always felt in the trans community. So I do think whether it's trans women, whether it's a cisgender women who are not fully owning the fullness of who they are, it's like, how can you see that for someone else? I feel that sometimes with other trans women, because I am so open, I am so vocal about my past, I'm not trying to kill off my past, I'm not trying to act as if that person never existed. I feel that that sometimes is a bit unsettling for other trans women because a lot of them don't really celebrate who they were. And it would took me a long time when people would ask me, like, what makes you different from other trans women? I finally realized that it's because I've understood my process. It's about the integration of who I am. I am grateful and I am very blessed to say that I transitioned into a very beautiful woman inside out. Yes, I did. However, before that, I was a very beautiful man. I did not change and become this beauty and then like become new to the sense of being admired or adorned in the world that I wasn't used to before. How I'm existing now was the same way how I was existing back then. Only thing is that my outer has changed and I'm just a bit more feminine, but I've always been who I am.
So I love to watch you on Instagram because you take us through all of the fun, glamorous life that you live, but you also take us through Self-Care Sundays. So tell us about how you take care of Gracie.
It's taken me a long time to get to that point of like really taking care of myself and really honoring myself and really carving out space specifically for me. We're brought up to believe that putting yourself first is selfish. If 2020 hasn't taught us anything, it has showed you that you must take care of yourself. You must make yourself a priority because it's just so much going on in your energy, your mental. It's like you really do have to guard it wisely. So for me, my meditation, my prayer, my yoga is my go-to. I really enjoy like just whatever it is that I'm doing, really shutting and tuning the world out and being okay with that. And I had to do that this past week. Like when the noise of the world and when just all of the like the trauma and the tragedy just becomes like overwhelming, I gave myself permission not to check out in terms of not hold space or not be aware of what's going on, but know that there's a time when I am doing the work, when I am out there on the front lines, and when I am out there protesting, and when I am out there in the month of Pride. And I mean, pride and protesting for me is all day, every day of my life, like just showing up and existing and just being. But I know that I show up in that capacity to where as though when I need to take a moment and like shut all that out, I'm okay with that. And I think that people, especially during this time, I think that people should really be okay with like taking care of themselves, doing whatever it is that feeds their soul, doing whatever it is that feeds their mind, doing whatever it is that feeds their family or their community. Just really doing the things that like you enjoy and love to do, or like allowing your little child to play, not being so like caught up in la la land so you're not aware of the responsibilities, but understanding that it's okay to like nurture yourself and take care of yourself.
My last question for you. I'm curious to know just one word that describes who you were before your transition, who you are now, and then who you hope to be. What are those words? Your past, present, your future.
My past, I would say seeking.
Hmm.
My present, I would say accepting. And my future, I would just say glory.
I love you, Gracie.
I love you more, Pie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.